Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Bible study with the next pastor. This is our 20th episode, and we are almost through the book of Genesis. I want to thank you all for hanging out with me for so long. I mean, man, 20 episodes. 20 episodes. Y'all must like this, huh? Y'all must like hanging around. Well, listen, I love having y'all hanging around. I deeply enjoy having you in the conversations and just having people who are on this therapeutic journey with me. Um, Again, when I started this, kind of like when we started the Sunday sessions on the channel, I had no idea that these things would be, this popular. I kind of have a rule in life, and this is something that I had to develop for my own mental health, is that I do things for me, right? So I share content on this channel for me because it's therapeutic for me, because it helps me get some of these things just off my chest and kind of process and just feel normal a little bit. You know what I'm saying? And that's the reason I do. That's my motivation. And so when I find that other people actually resonate with these things, identify with these things, or get some type of value from this, that is the freaking icing on the cake, man. It's absolutely beautiful to me, and so I'm glad to have y'all here. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider joining our community either on YouTube, Patreon, or Discord. Consider volunteering in our community, and I'm going to push that every chance I get. And whether you're volunteering in our community or anybody else's community, consider volunteering. Get involved. Don't just be a mouthpiece on the sidelines. Get involved. I wonder how it don't be a side piece on the mouth lines work. Sorry. Yeah. And we have merch. Check out that merch. Okay. So we have been in the book of Genesis ever since we started this. It's our commitment. We're gonna go all the way through. So far, I think we've actually done more than most churches have. Isn't that amazing? Many people who've gone through church their whole life, have been to church their whole lives, have never been a part of anything that actually walks through the Bible chapter by chapter. And of course, in these conversations, I would not necessarily substitute these for a good faith Bible study. These are a whole different type of situation. This is not where you come to learn more about the Bible. This is not where you come to learn more about the Lord Almighty. This is not where you come to learn more about God. This is not even where you come to learn more about mythology. My focus, especially with the content that's on this channel, is really to provide more of a sociological perspective and some of the social nuances that are often overlooked. And I do that by using my life as a backdrop. I'm going to be the one to get naked first, as one of my mentors used to say, which I'm sure sounds very odd saying it that way. Just to be clear, he was not actually getting naked, but it was his way of saying, in order to help other people be willing to be vulnerable, you have to be willing to be vulnerable yourself first. And so one of the ways that I do that is I'm just sharing with you all the things that I've thought about these scriptures over the years, the things that I've thought about these stories, how I've even preached some of these stories, and some of the things that I thought while I was deconstructing and really more aptly deconverting. Because I think the most accurate way to describe my experience with Christianity, um, and as a believer, was that I was a person who was in deconstruction from day damn one. I've been deconstructing since the beginning. When I got to do an interview with Sidney Davis Jr., and in that, I was able to highlight this idea that for me, I never believed that this was true. That's why it required faith. My understanding that my faith would eventually bring me face to face with reason, and it didn't. You understand? So I described my whole process as deconstruction. I held on for as long as I could, and then finally realized, like, hey, bro, you held on a little too long. It's time to let go. You have enough evidence. You have enough reason that this is not a viable means of interacting with the world around you, especially if you want to make a difference that is more than token. And of course, that was just for me. And I hope that's something that, that I hope that's something that kind of oozes off of me. You know what I'm saying? That, yep, I see, like, if you don't know why I'm here, why I'm doing this, and what my goal is, I don't know if you're paying attention, because I really do try to do my best to let it just ooze. You know what I'm saying? Let it just ooze, because it's just who I am, and that's what stepping away from the pulpit did for me. It gave me the freedom to be me, to be authentically me, which is why most of the times I'm not looking to convince anybody else, nor am I looking to be convinced by anybody else. I kind of got this, you know what I'm saying? As far as my life, as far as me, this I'm good at. For years, I lived like I wasn't, like I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and that I couldn't know what I was doing, and that only the Lord could know, because the Lord knew everything. And so I had to trust Him. But now I'm like, oh no, I got me. I got me, you know. All right, so let's jump into this. Today, we're in Genesis chapter 39. We've gotten into some of my favorite stories. Last week was absolutely a hoot, because we got to talk about masturbation and prostitutes. So wasn't that fun? When have you done that in a Bible study? Well, that probably happens more often in Bible studies than we want to admit. A lot of Bible studies are about masturbation. Masturbation and pornography is a real issue in the mind of many believers. It's so weird to me. It's so weird. All right, so we're in Genesis chapter 39. Oh, I have not shared my screen, so y'all are nowhere. Let me share my screen. That'll help, right? Because then you can actually see what's going on. We're going to go over here. Hopefully, I shouldn't need to do any jumping. I can't believe it took me that I did not share my screen. We would have been jumping into this with nothing going on. Y'all wouldn't have been able to see nothing. But now you can. So we should all be happy and we should all be good. We are in Genesis chapter 39, church. Let's go to verse 1. This story is allegedly, as it's styled, labeled, Joseph's success in Egypt. Right? Again, I'm one of those people who are like, I don't see how other people do not see the focus on prosperity, abundance, and success in the Bible. It's there. I think a lot of times people have mistaken the words of Jesus. And most times without even being fully acclimated to the context of the gospel. But so people, and I see it all the time, and I'm like, I don't mind you being against something. But to say, oh, well, Jesus wasn't for this, I'm like, don't expose your own ignorance like that, because number one, you don't know Jesus. So the only thing you can judge Jesus by are the words that are in the book. And if you judge the Jesus by the words that are in the book, he is just as much prosperity focused as the Old Testament is. Again, he promises his disciples that they will receive 100-fold for leaving their families. He tells them this. But I mean, go back and read through how many parables are about receiving 100-fold. Okay. I'm just saying. Don't shoot the messenger. The only way you could make it make sense that Jesus is not aligned with that type of ideology is you'd have to find places where Jesus actually says, hey, I know I said this, but that's not what I meant. Right? Like, I think people overlook the fact that Jesus had a treasury. Jesus had a treasury. And when it came time to feed the 5,000, he did not use the money that was in the treasury. Which I think there's some prolific social lessons that can be drawn from that. But the Jesus of the Bible and the Bible itself doesn't align with much of what I hear critics of the church saying. And it's just like, you're not gonna win an argument by not having a founded argument. And That's my thing. And so that's why a lot of times, and I do try to bring some of this nuance to the conversation, because a lot of times I see people just saying stuff and I'm like, no, these are popular narratives, but how does this help? And if it doesn't help, why are we so invested in doing it over and over and over again? I'm sorry, I left superstition for a reason. I'm not interested in doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. I want real results. Okay, that's just me. Verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And again, the Ishmaelites are actually Joseph's relatives. They are his kin. They are his family. You know what I'm saying? Um, and Joseph was sold to them by his brothers. So Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, and this was the good plan, because the other plan was to kill him. Okay, and the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. Did y'all read that? And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. I'm going to read it one more time because you're slow, but you're worth waiting on. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. I told y'all, every time we run into stuff like this in scripture, I'm going to highlight the hell out of it, because I don't like disingenuousness regardless of who it's coming from, which is why I deeply encourage people to reserve your opinions if they're not foundationally informed, you know? But no, obviously, the Lord being with Joseph is correlated with Joseph being successful, or if you read the little footnote here, prosperous. All right. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Oh, gotta love those Egyptians, right? Which, according to some people, these are not Egyptians, these are aliens. And I say that because in Exodus, they're apparently building pyramids. And so if they're building pyramids, we know it's not the Egyptians, it's the aliens. That's so racist, right? That it's oh man, aliens. But technically it's accurate. Oh God. Okay, so you want to deal with when I technical accuracy will get you in trouble, because it will help you see how some things have been used as emotional scapegoats and dog whistles. You know, it's accurate. The pyramids were built by aliens, because technically we are all indeed aliens. It's a very interesting thing. But another one, and this is something that me and my family had a conversation about, just a funny little rabbit trail here. Christopher Columbus discovered America. This, today, has been grossly repudiated. And by repudiated, we say no. Christopher Columbus did not discover America. It was already discovered. Okay. That's actually not how discovery works. All right, so there's a little rabbit trail. Now, obviously, I'm not a fan of Christopher Columbus, so please do not think I'm trying to excuse that madman. What I am trying to demonstrate here is the disingenuousness of narratives and propaganda. The idea or the statement that Christopher Columbus discovered America does not mean that other people would not have discovered it before him. If you're in a new city and you say, "Ooh, I just discovered this lovely Italian restaurant." When you say such a statement, do you mean that nobody else knew about that lovely Italian restaurant and that nobody had discovered it prior to you? No, you don't mean that at all. You simply mean this was something that you did not know about and you do now know about. You discovered it. Even in the church world, we often said people found Jesus. Well, when a person finds Jesus, does that mean that Jesus was lost to everybody else prior to that person finding Jesus? Absolutely not. When you find a new show on Netflix, ooh, I just found this new show. Does that mean that that show was undiscovered by anybody else before you stumbled across it? Absolutely not. Disingenuous people have taken arguments that have no spoils. And that's typically how I know when it's just dog whistle. Like, what's the win? What do we win out of this? This is true. What do we get? And it's nothing. It's just to pull on people's emotions. This guy has been dead forever. I don't even know why he's still a topic. But no, people saying that Christopher Columbus discovered America is not an inaccurate statement. He discovered it on behalf of the people he was working for. That is accurate. Doesn't mean that nobody else was living there before them. It doesn't mean that nobody else discovered it before him. And so, just accuracy stuff. Accuracy stuff there. Something about me. It's one of my pet peeves. It's one of the reasons that I am good at what I do. But it's also one of the reasons that I may be a little difficult to get along with. Because I have a high standard of engagement. And it's just like, because I'm really concerned about people capacity. And I realize how many mistakes I've made in my life before, just kind of trying to follow the crowd and not trusting my own understanding of the world. And so now I trust my understanding. And so if you want to influence my thinking, you have to enhance my understanding. That's good. Okay. Man, we're barely getting through this, so let's roll. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did prosper in his hand. Isn't that good? So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he owned. So I want to walk you through a little bit how preachers would kind of preach through this type of text and how they'd communicate this to their congregations, primarily because they would believe that whatever they're receiving from this text is being downloaded into them by the Spirit of God. And so they would say, I want y'all to watch this, that even when everybody else counted Joseph out and had put him in the pit and then transitioned him from the pit into the prison, even when everybody else counted him out, the text says that the Lord was with Joseph. I just want to remind somebody that no matter what you're going through, no matter what it looks like, no matter how much you feel like you can't take, I came to let somebody know that the Lord is with you. That's how we kind of would have walked that through a little bit. And then we would have went ahead and added the addendum. And do you know what it means, beloved, if the Lord is with you? It's one thing to have your mama with you. It's one thing to have your daddy with you. It's one thing to even have your best friend with you. But when you have the Lord with you, the text says, and the Lord was with Joseph. So what? Joseph became a successful man. Can I prophesy to about 30 people out there that the success you've been waiting on is showing up with the Lord? That's how we kind of walk that through. This is why I often kind of remind people to pay attention to the traumatic lingo that is often used in urban preaching. It's always tying people to this identity of you can't take it. You're going through. Life is really, really hard, but the Lord is going to work some magic and you're not going to have to worry about it. It's good preaching, though. I mean, it makes you feel good, but it only makes you feel good because you believe that this idea that everybody is struggling and nobody can overcome basic things, you have convinced yourself that this is true for everybody and that no one has figured out a way to navigate that, so that your only hope of resolve is the Lord. As preachers, we tell you that there are plenty of people who tried to figure it out. Money couldn't do it. Clothes couldn't do it. Houses, cars, and lands couldn't do it. Baby, if the Lord don't do it for you, then it can't be done. These are the type of theatrics that we employed. And I want to remind people that when I was doing these things, when I was saying these things, I didn't think I was scamming anybody. I thought I was preaching the truth. And if I was, damn, I was horrible at it. I didn't make no money. I didn't start making money till I became an atheist. Ain't that crazy? Now, I'm not saying that there weren't people in my industry that wasn't making money. Now, obviously, there were people in my industry that was making money. But there are people in every industry that's making money. That's the nuance. All right, so the Lord, um, because the Lord is with Joseph, and because the Lord has made Joseph successful, now you do have to wrestle with what the fuck is success when you're a slave. But there's the nuance. That means something different to different people. One thing that I'd encourage people to do when it comes to, especially the Black experience in this country, is to actually go back and find some slave diaries, slave memoirs, and read about these things. Please don't let propaganda and popular narrative become the commonality. You can read, God damn it, so do so. And once you do so, maybe many of you will begin to realize why I have so many diverse thoughts on such matters. It's because I'm well read, and reading is powerful to me, especially when it's stuff like memoirs and autobiographies and things of that nature, because you're reading a person's experience, or at least their recollection of the experience. Now, you have to be mindful that even their recollection can't be trusted. So when I'm reading these things, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, they said it happened, it must have happened. That, as a sociologist, that's not how I look at it. When I look at it, I say, they said it happened, they must feel that it did. And either way, that gives you valuable information about those people and what those people thought. And I'd say read it. Make no assumptions about anything. I'll use a scripture here. There's a way that seems right, but in the end, it leads to destruction. I'd say make no assumptions. Actually, go read some of these stories, and you'd be likely surprised. And I bring that up because Joseph here is a slave, but he's a slave that has become a successful man while still being a slave. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And that is a very unpopular dichotomy that exists in all amongst all slave holding regimes. That there are some people who can see the absolute immorality, the absolute inhumanity of a system, and there are other people who can be in that system and find a way to navigate it for their success. That's nuance. But we there are a lot of stories like that in African American history, to be sure. On the whole, there's stories that spans the whole gamut. I love them all. It's because I love history. I love learning. I love learning about the victories of people in the past. I love learning about the failures of people in the past. I love learning about the misunderstandings of the people of the past. It's highlight. It's awe inspiring for me. All right, so he put him over everything that he owned. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. So the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. Okay, we're only 5 verses in. We've seen the word successful or prosperous twice. We've seen the word favor twice. We've seen the word blessed several times, and we're only 5 verses in. This is a very central theme to this story. This idea that those who are connected to God are prosperous, which I don't understand how it would make any other sense. Why would you want to be connected to a God who's going to keep you broke? That ain't smart. No, no. Okay, so Joseph is being put over stuff, and this ideology is very, very, very prevalent in urban churches, because then it becomes the idea, and even Tyler Perry platformed this in one of his plays, that this place is only blessed because I'm here. hmm Oh man, and once I leave, Ichabod will be on the doors, which means the glory of the Lord has departed from here. I'm the blessing that's keeping the doors open. even though I'm not actually willing to learn how this place works and contribute it to its success. I can have a position that has absolutely nothing to do with the role of with this company and what this company does at all. But because of scriptures like this and because of irresponsible, disingenuous preaching, I will allow myself to overinflate my ego and say, I am the reason that something is successful, even though I do not have any type of roadmap or blueprint that shows my involvement in this success. Yep. Magical thinking, by any other words. Verse 6. So he left Joseph in charge of everything that he owned, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, which means he had a good looking face and good looking body. Oh, damn. Go ahead, Joseph. And it came about after these events that his master's wife had her eyes on Joseph. And she said, sleep with me. Okay. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look with me. Look, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put me in charge of all that he owns. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God? Joseph seems like a fairly righteous fellow, right? I mean, compared to the people he descended from, compared to Abraham, compared to Isaac, compared to Jacob, and compared to all of Joseph's brothers, Joseph seems to be a stand-up guy. He is like literally, he's been betrayed by his family and just one of the most heinous ways. And he's having to like literally rebuild his entire life as a slave. And he does it with such integrity. And you feel bad for calling it integrity because he's a slave. And it's like he shouldn't be having to have any integrity here. He should be free. But he does this with such integrity. He goes through this, and maybe it's because the Lord's blessing him. So that's kind of like a little cheat sheet. But he does this with such integrity that this woman comes to him, and the text tells me that Joseph is good looking. It don't tell me that she is. So I could say that Joseph is being honorable, but this lady might have been very highly unattractive. We don't know. We do know that marriages during this times were often arranged. We ain't even heard nothing about Potiphar being very happy about this woman. You understand? Okay. So, but anyway, she offers him the goodies, as someone would say, and he declines, and he gives this great rationale for declining. He's like, your husband has been good to me. He could have treated me like anybody else, but he recognized that there was something different about me. He recognized that, hey, this guy, is gifted, and he's trusted me with a lot of things. And now you just think you're gonna throw some booty my way, and I'm gonna throw it all away? Let's find out. Though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the people of the household was there inside. This heifer done cleared out the house. When she saw that he had left his garment, when she saw that he had left his, oh, sorry. So she grabbed him by his garment, saying, sleep with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. So it sounds like she's not getting any from Potiphar, because she's like really desperate. Like, no, I need you to get in here. I need you to knock these cobwebs out. I need some pipe service. I need you to work on this plumbing. There's so many innuendos that I could use here. And Joseph runs. And when he fled, she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside. She called to the men of her household and said to them, see, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make fun of us. He came into me to sleep with me, and I screamed. I'm pausing there, obviously, because of the insanity of what just happened here, but also because of the word Hebrew that's used there. I have a lot of thoughts there, but I'm gonna let those process. But this reminded me of a scene in Rosewood. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that movie. It can be deeply traumatizing. I actually enjoyed the movie as a kid, which means I have to add Don Cheadle to my list. Okay, separate list. Don't even worry about that. It'll be a video that I'm making. But so yeah, it's like, she plays rape. Dude has done nothing to her. Um she's been the aggressor here. And when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, um, he left his garments beside me and fled and went outside. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with these words: "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to make fun of me." I don't think that's how I remember reading that. And obviously, remember, this is the New American Standard Bible, so translations are different. But that is odd. But when he came in to make fun of you, now the story seems all too realistic because I've seen stuff like this. He left his garment beside me and fled outside. Now, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she had spoken, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in the prison. Just a little redundant there, right? But the Lord was with Joseph. There it is again. Remember earlier, the Lord was with Joseph. And the Lord extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the warden of the prison. All right. The Lord is with him, and the Lord is the evidence of the Lord being with him. Is the favor on his life. And the warden of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The warden of the prison did not supervise anything under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and the Lord made whatever he did prosper. I'm not making this up. That's there. All right. This whole chapter is ultimately letting us know how two things: that the Lord is with Joseph, and because the Lord is with Joseph, Joseph has favor. Joseph is blessed. Joseph is prosperous. All right. Now, from a theological perspective, for those of us who believed in a God who was all good, stories like this actually create quite a bit of problem. The fact that you'd have to say that the Lord is with someone would mean that the Lord is not understood to be with everyone. And if the evidence of the Lord being with someone, if the evidence of God's kindness to someone is prosperity and favor, then absent of a world where everybody is prosperous, there is no good God. This would be a God of favoritism. Hence the word favor. I think we have time for another chapter. Let's see. Yoink. I love that button. Now I can just make it go to the next one. Yay. Now this is Joseph's this one is about Joseph interpreting dreams. This is a very central piece in his story. And I think this is one that doesn't get enough attention. It always gets attention from the more fantastical, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat type of way, as opposed to paying attention to some of the more social elements that are in this story that I think are actually really valuable. Genesis chapter 40, I think, may be the first book or first chapter in the book, in the entire book, that we get to where there is some information that can be helpful even for everyday life in today. So let's jump in this chapter and see. Verse 1, then it came about after these things that the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And so this is the cupbearer and the baker, the person who brings the wine or the drinks and also test it to make sure it's not poisonous, and the baker who would also, bring food and hopefully test it to make sure it's not poisonous. It is interesting that these are two food people, but that may have some significance. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. These are high folk. Like, what did they do? Did they just stop cooking? They say, you know what? I ain't bringing him nothing else to drink. I'm not baking him no more pies. Not until he get this economy right. Maybe got something like that. I don't know. They didn't give us the story. But and these are the chief folk. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard in the prison, the same place where Joseph was in prison. This sentence could have been much shorter. It could have just been any. So he put them in prison with Joseph. See there, writers, I helped you. And the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, behold, they were dejected. I like that word. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" Okay. This is just me being nitpicky. But verse 7 says, so he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house. I thought Potiphar was his master's house, and he hasn't been there in a while. He's not in anybody's house at this moment. He's in prison, which of course you could say it was Pharaoh's house because everything would belong to Pharaoh. But in this case, then there would be no need for the word master, or there would be no need for the word Pharaoh. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his house. But the fact that we're designating that the house belongs to the masters, this seems like a major snafu. So why are your faces so sad today? And they said to him, we have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. Well, I guess we are all sad because we are all having dreams, and there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do interpretations not belong to God? Tell it to me, please. Joseph used language like this. This won't be the first time we'll see something like this, but he says, interpretation of a thing belongs to God. In other words, God is the only person who can interpret. So tell me the dream because I can interpret it. But that is, I can interpret it because I have a relationship with God that none of you are capable of having. Otherwise, I just show you how to tap into your God zone and interpret it for your damn self. All right. So, of course, again, the issues of this God being all loving and unconditional, even in the positive stories, it fails. You can't be a God that's equally loving to everybody, but you're only choosing to speak to some of the folk. Hello. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph, saying to him, in my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me. And on the vine were three branches, and as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, this is the interpretation of the three branches of it. The three branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hands as in your former practice when you were his cupbearer. Only keep in mind when it goes well for you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. That's probably the realest thing that we've seen Joseph say. He said, look, I'm gonna interpret this dream. I'm gonna interpret this dream for you. But when I do, and you get out, remember your boy. Remember who told you it was gonna happen. Oh, and that's very common in the church world. Remember, I told you it was gonna work out. Uh-huh. You gonna give me some of the money now? That's how it be. That's how it be. Like, yikes. You telling me that it's gonna happen and me making it happen. There's a value imbalance there. How I owe you for man, get out of here. All right. For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into the dungeon. When the chief baker saw that he interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph, I saw in my dream, and behold, there were three baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket, there was some of all kinds of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. This is it. This is its interpretation. The three baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you, and you will hang, and will hang you on a wooden post, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. All right, so now this reminds me of a scene in the movie Life. If you've not seen Life yet, I encourage you to go see it. It is an exceptional production done by Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy. Exceptional cast just all the way through. But at one point in the scene, when Martin's character first gets into prison, Martin and Eddie have been in prison for something that they did not do, and this takes place I think maybe the 30s and 40s. So they're working on a chain gang in prison, and when they get there, they realize that the other inmates are not literate, so they don't know how to read, and they all have these letters that they've been holding on to for so long. And so Martin decides to, offer to read the letters, and he reads the first letter, and it turns out everybody in the dude's family had died. He had like 6 letters of just every letter was something that somebody had died, and so this is what this feels like. You reading people prison letters because they can't read them themselves. They are illiterate. See, these people are dream illiterate. They can't interpret the dreams themselves. And so Joseph Martin, Eddie Murphy, rather. No, yeah, it was Eddie. Eddie Murphy, Joseph, comes in, decides to read those letters for everybody. Somebody got a good letter. This dude did not. The birds are not eating out of a basket off of your head. They are eating you, homie. I would have just been like, you could have kept that to yourself, bro. I feel like you got a problem with me if that's how you interpreted my dream. Like, what I do to you to where you want to interpret my dream this way? Like, you can interpret dreams the other way. Why you interpret mine? That's just me. So it came about on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he held a feast for all of his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office and he put the cup into the Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. And this is also a common theme in Joseph's life. Joseph will be forgotten a lot. Actually, like I think maybe I don't know if it's the first chapter of Exodus or the second chapter of Exodus, but and there arose a king who remembered Joseph not. Joseph is a forgotten person, even by God. Remember, God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Does not include Joseph, even though Joseph seems to be the most righteous out of all of these folk. And now that we kind of see the interpretation of the dreams, I think I actually know what happened with the Pharaoh. Now, obviously, this is speculation from an author's perspective and eisegesis from a biblical perspective. But either way, this is my story, and I'm sticking to it. I think the Pharaoh found out that somebody had put some poison in his stuff, and he couldn't figure out if it was the cupbearer who did it or the baker. And he said, "Until I find this out, I'm putting both of y'all asses in prison." And then, while they're in prison, he does his investigation. Turns out it was the baker. Oh, it feels like Clue now, doesn't it? It was the baker. The baker did it. And of course, the butler, the cupbearer, does not remember Joseph. All right, I don't want to leave this story on a cliffhanger, so we're going to do one more chapter. This is almost like the early days, right? The early days, I was knocking like 3 or 4 chapters out in an episode, and then we started slowing down so that we can really focus on one chapter. But I think this is good. Y'all ready? Can y'all make it through another chapter with me? Y'all want to hang out for another 15 minutes here? Let's lock and load. Now, it happened at the end of 2 full years. Now, I don't know if this is 2 full years after the cupbearer came out and forgot Joseph or 2 full years after Joseph got in prison. But either way, we now know that Joseph has been imprisoned for a minimum of 2 years. And Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. This is the one with the good stuff in it. And behold, from the Nile, 7 cows came up, fine looking and fat. Fine looking and fat. That sounds like a brother describing somebody, don't it? Bruh, she fine and fat, homie. And they grazed in the marsh grass. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and thin. Again, this sounds like a brother describing a night at the club. And they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. Then the ugly and thin cows ate the 7 fine looking and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. I remember reading this as a child, thinking, "What the hell is going on?" Like I did not have the nuance or the poetic appreciation yet to kind of understand this story. And I was a poet when I was a kid too, but not on this level, you know. And this story is actually, even as a non-believer, this is one of my favorite stories. This one right here in this chapter. What chapter is this? 41. One of my favorite stories because of the lesson that it teaches. And notice that this story is not necessarily about God. The lesson that this story shares is a story about management. And before I go too far on that rabbit trail, let's proceed so you see what I'm talking about. Um, so Pharaoh wakes up because the ugly cows ate the good-looking cows. That would scare the hell out of me and wake me up too. But then he fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. And the thin ears swallowed the 7 plump and full ears. Why I use the word swallow? Then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Now in the morning his spirit was troubled, so he sent messages and called for all the soothsayer priests of Egypt, and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. I highly doubt that one. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I would make mention today of my own offenses. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. All right, so there's that answer to the house. The prison is apparently the house of the bodyguard. That sucks. Then we had a dream one night, he and I, each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now a Hebrew youth was there with us, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard, and we told him the dreams, and he interpreted our dreams for us. For each man, he interpreted according to his own dream. Now that absolutely does clarify what we were seeing in I guess that's chapter 40, what we were seeing there. So the master's house was the bodyguard's house, because we did see that the bodyguard, after seeing that Joseph was so prosperous in prison because of the Lord, he became Joseph's master, because that's what happens when you prosperous. Somebody else becomes your master. I have a lot of nuanced thoughts here. Wow. Okay. Because I've seen that type of paradigm play out. Yep. Yep. Um, and just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. Pharaoh restored me in my office, but he hanged the chief baker. Then Pharaoh sent word and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. I've had a dream, but no one can interpret it. Imagine if that speech went that way. But no one can interpret it. And I have heard it said about you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph then answered Pharaoh, saying, it has nothing to do with me. God will give Pharaoh an answer for his own good. All right. This statement is a problematic statement. It's a self deprecating statement. And maybe the wording is different in the original, but however the NASB has done this is butchery for damn sure. Because you can't say it has nothing to do with me and then tell me the dream. At that moment, it has something to do with me. At this moment, the authors don't understand the word nothing. Again, I know stuff like this is probably nitpicky for people, but to me, this is the way that you get people robbed of their autonomy, when you allow them to think this is a valid statement, and the validity of this statement is highly in question. It is not valid to say that it has nothing to do with me if you have to talk to me to get the answer. Even if I believe that God is active, he still requires me as the vessel. Hello. So yeah, that's I only highlight that because that is a dangerous ideology that is present in many urban churches, seeker friendly churches, where it's not about me, it's just God. Anything that I'm doing, it's not actually me doing. It has nothing to do with me, and it's not just the things that they deserve credit for, where they use this type of ideology. It's also the things that they deserve absolute judgment for, where they use this type of ideology. No, that wasn't me. That was God doing this. And so either way, it removes people from actually critically engaging their part in the solution or the problem. Okay. All right, all right. He said it wasn't me. God would do this. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream, there I was standing on the bank of the Nile. I can't believe they're going to repeat the dream in a book. We've already seen the dream." Excuse me. And behold, 7 cows, fat and fine looking, came up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the marsh. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I had never seen for ugliness and ugliness in all the land of Egypt. That is hilarious to me. I do like the fact that they repeated it this time, because this time Pharaoh added extra juice to it. He added extra tea to it. I want to stress how ugly this is. I had never seen nothing this ugly in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh definitely sounds like a black person. Like this is how my uncles talk. I ain't seen nothing that ugly on this side of town in so damn long, bro. I ain't seen nothing this ugly. And the thin and ugly cows ate the first 7 fat cows. Yet when they had devoured them, it could not be detected that they had devoured them, for they were just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. So somehow Pharaoh was thinking that the ugly cows was going to eat the good-looking cows and then become good-looking. Actually, the nuance there is that even though the words here are used like attractive and things of that nature that we'd use between interspecies relationships, the attractive nature is fat here. Fine and fat. Why? Because then we have something to eat. The better to eat you with, my dear. Type of thing. I also saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears of grain, full and good, came up on a single stalk, and behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind sprouted up after them, and the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. Then I told it to the soothsayer priest, but there was no one who could explain it to me. This dream is a little more hard for me to get, because I'd be asking so many questions like, can you explain to me what it looks like for corn to swallow more corn? Like, the cows eating the other cows, obviously it was going to be traumatic to try to envision that, but it was possible to envision that. Corn eating corn is difficult for me. I had a cousin one time that told me that he had a dream that he was being chased by a naked muffin, and I was just like, okay, now I don't know what naked means when it comes to muffin. Did it not have the wrapper? Did it have the body of a person with no clothes on? Or maybe it didn't have any preservatives. I don't know. But I have a hard time envisioning, in this case, something that does not have a mouth, but does have a form, swallowing something else. Like you can say the wind swallows, but it's because, yes, the wind doesn't have a mouth, but it doesn't have a form either. Like fire, water, these type of things. So this here, me and Pharaoh would have been going back and forth for a minute. Like, bro, you have to draw me a picture. Let's go ahead and draw a line in the sand and show me what you're trying to do. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. The 7 thin and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 thin ears scorched by the east wind will be 7 years of famine. That's interesting. All of Joseph's dream interpretation seems to have a time-based thing. Remember, he did the same thing to the cupbearer and the baker. Oh yeah, that's 3 days. That's what that means. 3 days. 3 this, 3 days. 7 things, years. So, behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them, 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of that subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is confirmed by God, and God will quickly bring it about. And this is actually a principle that many theologians, more so practitioners, attach themselves to. That whenever there is a repetition, it is God confirming it. which is why you see this pattern used many times in Christ's language, where he says truly, truly, or verily, verily. It's stating it twice, which means it's confirmed by God according to these type of thinkings. So now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise, and appoint him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him take a fifth of the produce of the land of Egypt as a tax in the 7 years of abundance. Then have them collect all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and have them guard it. Let the food be used as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish during the famine. Now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. And typically, from my understanding of biblical literature, when you see this language of something seeming good, being good, or is good, and the scripture kind of stressing that, then that thing is supposed to be of significant importance. And so the thing here that's introduced that hasn't really been introduced prior to this moment in the story is management. That's what this whole vision is about. And to me, like, out of, and we'll go through the whole Bible, but out of all of the parables in the Bible, this is definitely one worth preserving. And now, mind you, there are plenty of other parables in mythology that also tells this exact same story. But the fact that humans were able to wrestle with this, I don't want to say so early in our development, because this was definitely later on in our development. But the fact that we were wrestling with this is admirable to me. Now, obviously, I don't believe that. Obviously, I don't believe that there was necessarily a Joseph or a Pharaoh in this case. That, and I don't believe these people are real. I don't. I don't have a reason to believe that these people are real. It really wouldn't matter to me one way or another. But the way that this story is outlined is absolutely amazing. Let's replace God with entropy. Like, life happens. This is what this is saying, that life happens. Now, in this case, it's like God is going to send good years and God is going to send bad years, you know. And of course, we know better than that. But like when we're reading any other fables, we don't tie ourselves to the personifications, because we understand that the personification is there as a literary device, as a way to help people get the picture right, and help them get to the point a little easier. So it seems to me that God is the personification of entropy, the unknowable, the unpredictable, this thing that keeps going and doesn't really give us any rest. And he says, you're going to have 7 good years and you're going to have 7 bad years. Can I give you a little hint here? Such is life. This isn't a moment that is just about Pharaoh and Joseph. And that's why I say that seems good point shows that this is actually more significant. It's kind of like in the beginning, and God saw it and said that it was good. This is an addendum. Here's something that is good. What is good for you to do is, when you are living well, to remember that bad times are guaranteed. Until we solve entropy, just as much good as you can have, there can be some bad that's on the way. And how you handle your good can either enable you or limit you in surviving the bad. So he says, when you have these 7 good years, don't spend everything. When life is going well, don't treat that as a constant. Don't treat that as a guarantee. Understand that the world you live in is swiftly changing. So always be mindful of what to put in store. And that's really what this story told him in a very, eloquent way. Like I said, Joseph's story, outside of his family being total jerks, is probably, like, again, it's something worth preserving for sure. That's stuff that economists can fight over. Sociologists can fight over this stuff. Man, we love this. We love these type of talks, these type of conversations. And this ultimately shows humanity realizing that we can manage our bad times, that we don't have to be victims of our environments, that we don't have to be victims of famine. And this is ultimately how the more we've developed, the more we've been able to separate ourselves from famine, which is what I believe this story is trying to show. So let's wrap this chapter up. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom there is a divine spirit?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has informed you of all of this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you are." Now, I do want to say the way this is written is incredibly disingenuous, or at least the way that it's translated. Because remember, we would know for a fact that Pharaoh doesn't believe in the God that Joseph believes in. So Pharaoh would not have said, "Since God has informed you of all of this." Hello. But I've highlighted this in my video about my problem with God. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it. It's one of my earlier videos. That the word God is not a word that actually appears in Scripture. It's a generic term. It's a Germanic term. It is not a name. No, capitalizing the first letter doesn't make it a name. It's not a name. And the characters in this book have names, whether it's Elohim, Yahweh, Adonai. There are names here. And so Pharaoh would have most likely used the name. But also notice that Joseph doesn't know Pharaoh's name either. Just pointing that out. You shall be in charge of my house, and all my people shall be obedient to you. Only regarding the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, "See, I have placed you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. Joseph is being treated better by this stranger than he was treated by his own family. And it's for no other reason than that Joseph has demonstrated himself as capable, as useful, and as valuable. And unfortunately, his own family could not see him that way. That's just some preaching interlude there. And he had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed ahead of him, "Bow the knee," and he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphenath Paneah, and gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Now, just in case I forget to mention this later, it's actually this verse right here, verse 45, which is the reason why Joseph is not identified with Abraham, Isaac, and Joseph and Jacob, because the religion that these early people, that's going to make it shake. The religion that these early people attached themselves to was ethnocentric. I mean, that starts from the very beginning of the damn book. It's ethnocentric. So when Joseph married outside, now if he just would have accepted them as a concubine, apparently it would have been fine. But because this is his primary wife, and his primary wife is Egyptian and is the daughter of a priest of another cult, this is actually what disqualifies Joseph from being mentioned with the other patriarchs. And we'll proof text that as we continue to go through this story. But I wanted to call that out, that Joseph is better, based on the story, than everybody that came before him. But because he married outside of his ethnicity, Abraham fucked outside of his ethnicity, and it was not a problem. Isaac fucked outside of his ethnicity, and it was not a problem. Jacob did a lot of fucking outside of his ethnicity, and it was not a problem. Joseph marries somebody, actually as a reward for the great and righteous work he had done, and gets excluded even further. I'm just pointing this stuff out. Verse 46. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood in the presence of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced abundantly. So he collected all the food of these 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Because you cannot manage what you do not measure, and manage it until you can't measure it. Ugh. That's so prosperity preaching stuff. Okay. And let's close out this chapter. Now, before the year of famine came, two sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all of my father's household. And he named the second Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So these are, this is good. Because in this way, what Joseph provides here is the utility of his God belief, which, remind you, we've gone through Abraham, we've gone through Isaac, and we've gone through Jacob. And in all of these, we could not find any evidence in their lives for actual God belief. It did very much look like they were using the idea of God belief to trick other people. But by the time we get into this fourth generation with Joseph, you see how I did that there? Because that's not often, but that is many times how God belief does develop. That the people who were closest to the belief did know that this belief was absolute bullshit. But because the belief kept getting passed down, the further it goes down the generations, the further removed that the people are from the fact that this is bullshit. So Joseph is one of the first who actually thinks this is legitimate. And so he gives the utility of God in two ways. Joseph cites the utility of God in two ways: that God has made me forget all my trouble, and that God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And again, this is also, just reminding people how there is this attachment of God and trauma. There's a correlation of God and trauma. The utility of God for Joseph is that he has made me forget all of the trouble that I went through with my family. He's made me forget that, and that he's made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Most of what you hear in modern urban preaching is going to be this: that the utility of God is that this is a God who is able to make your troubles matter. Come on now. And is able to make you fruitful. Hello. And he named the second Ephraim. Okay, read that. When the 7 years of plenty which had taken place in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, there was a famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Which means Egypt at this time is the house of bread. Now, for those of you who are on the fringes, you remember that's what Bethel, which becomes Bethlehem, it's the house of bread. But in this case, Egypt is the bread basket. So when all the land of Egypt suffered famine, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph, whatever he says to you, you shall do. When the famine was spread over the entire face of the earth, then Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Then the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the earth. And now these were also areas for me that highlighted mythology. There's mythological language here. And mythological language in ancient literature is as easy as detecting in ancient literature as it is detecting in modern conversations. And what you're looking for is exaggerations and hyperboles, which what you have here. When the famine was spread over the entire face of the earth, what we'd have an understanding is outside of something absolutely exceptional or phenomenal, nobody during this time would have had any clue what was happening over the entire face of the earth, according to our modern knowledge at this moment. So when you see that, it's likely a safe assumption, oh, are these people just telling a story or lying? just to make it clear. I'm not saying they're lying, trying to be deceptive. I'm using the word lie in the sense that it's not a truth. And that's what extreme exaggerations, hyperbole, are supposed to be red flags for. But either way, this is still a story that I find just as valuable as the Jedi, really, because I think that's a valuable story. And then the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the earth. We have made it through, and we didn't just make it through one chapter, not just two chapters, but we've made it through three chapters. And next week, we're going to pick up with chapter 42. And I promise you things get good there. And then where do we go after that? Yeah. Okay, so it is quite a few. Let's see how many, because I wanted to remember how many more chapters we go. That has to be Jacob moves to Egypt. That has to be it. 47. No, I feel like there's a 52. So we got a few more chapters to go. We are definitely almost through. There it is. All right, yeah. We're almost through with the entire book of Genesis, which, I'm excited about. That makes me incredibly happy. I didn't realize we'd make it this far. I didn't, but I'm happy. I'm happy. I've learned a lot. This has been incredibly therapeutic. I hope it's been valuable for you. I hope I've been able to say something that either gets those gears turning, or maybe it makes you want to look deeper into something else, or maybe it just makes you thankful that you're on this side of reason. But whatever it is, I'm so grateful of having you here with me, participating in the chats and going along. So listen, I'm going to wrap this up now. If you haven't already, go ahead and make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider joining our community, consider volunteering in our community, consider financially supporting, check out our merch. That's one of the easiest ways to do so. And yeah, I think that's all I got. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and if you can, and I only mean it now, if you can, stay beautiful. I'll holler at you.